The day Zhang Zhongqian swapped the audit report with fraudulent data, Xintai Group's stock price crashed at the opening bell. Hua Mingde tore up Lu Ming's professional credentials in public. Su Yingxue smiled into the camera while holding fabricated evidence, and Zhao Qingye's merger agreement was signed into effect right on the limit-down board. A rainstorm pounded the corrugated iron roof of an urban village shack. Lu Ming peeled off his soaked mover's uniform, exposing the washed-out cuffs of a dress shirt underneath. At that very moment, in the convention hall of the Singapore International Finance Summit, the security chief was barking into his headset. The route for the founder of Blackstone Capital must be completely cleared. Level 1 security. An 18-yuan bowl of beef noodles sat steaming. Lu Ming sat at a greasy folding table, stirring cilantro with his chopsticks. A few tables over, young analysts in suits laughed loudly. Su Yingshue's face flickered across a phone screen mid-interview. Her chin tilted up at an angle he once knew well. Thank you, Chairman Zhao, for your trust. I will lead Xintai Capital to conquer the challenges of cross-border M&A. Lu Ming swallowed his noodles. Broth splattered onto his cuff. On the giant screen across the building, the Financial Innovation Awards ceremony was being broadcast live. Zhang Zhongqian was walking arm in arm with Zhao Qingye. A glint of light reflecting off the trophy landed precisely in Lu Ming's pupil. The alleyways at night were narrow and damp. Lu Ming, carrying a load, sidestepped to avoid a luxury car speeding through. The window rolled down, revealing Hua Mingde's face. Well. Architect Lu. In the passenger seat, Su Yingxue covered her mouth. Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes were cold. Still hauling sacks? Hua Mingde deliberately hit the accelerator, splashing muddy water all over Lu Ming. It's dirty. Do it again, Su Yingxue said. Next week at the International Finance Summit, I'm representing Xintai to announce the preliminary results of CrossPass. Your loser name better never show up. Lu Ming turned and walked into the rain. In a rooftop tin shack, he twisted on a desk lamp. The halo of light fell upon a wall covered with world maps. His fingertip traced from Singapore to Zurich, finally stopping at a coordinate on the shores of Lake Geneva. An encrypted satellite phone connected. A crisp Oxford accent came through the receiver. Blackstone's short positions have been established. 5 times leverage. We await the day Xintai Capital announces its breakthrough progress to initiate the short-selling protocol. Lu Ming's voice was completely flat, but his gaze landed on a battered notebook at the corner of the desk. He opened it. On the title page was a structural sketch he had hand-drawn 3 years ago. Not a financial model, but a building that was never constructed. Spatial joints precise, every load-bearing node marked with a mechanics formula. He had once believed that the architecture of a financial system, like that of a building, could support a visible weight. Later, he learned that the human heart has no load-bearing walls. 72 hours later, the Hong Kong stock market opening bell rang. Lu Ming crouched on the floor of his rented room, fingertip gliding across the tablet showing Xintai Capital's soaring candlestick chart. After hitting a new all-time high, the stock price suddenly froze, like a steel cable stretched to its limit. Just as the Tokyo morning sun pierced the clouds, the first 50 million level sell order appeared on the order book. London fund managers were still having their morning tea when sell orders surged out like a tide. By the time the sun rose over Singapore, a red waterfall was pouring down the digital screen. At the International Finance Summit venue, beneath crystal chandeliers, the crowd mingled in their finest. Hua Mingde stood at the main podium, the giant screen behind him displaying slides of a falsified investment model. This revolutionary cross-border payment system will rewrite the global financial landscape. Zhao Qingye was beaming. Su Yingxue was in front of the media cameras, touting her contribution to the model. The side door of the hall was pushed open. Lu Ming, wearing a crumpled suit, walked in and headed straight for the backstage area. A security guard reached out to stop him but was shoved aside by the summit chairman, who had rushed over in a fluster. Why are you coming through here? The VIP lounge has long been prepared. Lu Ming raised a hand to stop him. His gaze cut through the crowd and locked onto Hua Mingde, who was spouting off on stage. Delivering a report, Lu Ming said flatly. Looks like some people just won't give up. Sneaking in here? Hua Mingde's sneer boomed through the hall via the microphone. Zhao Qingye frowned and waved his hand, signaling security to remove him. The PPT on the main screen suddenly flickered, then switched to an original system architecture diagram marked Top Secret. The modeler's name was unmistakably Lu Ming, dated 3 years prior, the international copyright number clearly visible. Immediately after, another document overlaid it. It was the internal meeting minutes of Xintai Capital, detailing the process flowchart instructing Huamingda to plagiarize the core algorithm and alter the security audit data. The entire hall erupted in an uproar. Huamingda's face turned ghostly pale. He pointed at the control console and screamed, "Hackers! It's a hacker attack! Not hackers!" Lu Ming picked up a backup microphone and pressed a remote. The giant screen played HD video. In the trading room, Su Yingxue was slipping a forged security assessment draft into the review documents. Huamingda was forging signatures on the compliance report. In the bottom right corner, the timestamp watermark of the National Time Service Center pulsed steadily. "It's evidence," he said. The hall was dead silent, then exploded. Reporters frantically pushed toward the stage. Zhao Qingye violently knocked over his speech notes and shouted to cut the power. The giant screen ignored the power cut and continued playing. Independent power supply. This time it was an audio file. Zhang Zhongqian's voice was crystal clear. "Push all the blame onto that sack hauler. I want him to rot so thoroughly in this industry that he can never come back." Su Yingxue slid off her chair, her makeup streaked by tears. The summit chairman, sweating, unfolded a parchment scroll. Following a joint investigation by the International Financial Ethics Committee, it is determined that the system security case involving Mr. Lu Ming 3 years ago was a deliberate frame-up. The original architecture results were systematically plagiarized by Huamingda and others. The original verdict is hereby revoked, and the awards are to be reclaimed. Lu Ming's phone vibrated. A message from Guyen popped up. Hong Kong stocks triggered circuit breaker. Xintai Capital market cap evaporated 89%. Zhao Qingye's margin account blew up. He tapped the screen lightly. Notify Meng Xinghe. Initiate the hostile takeover plan. On the trading floor in Central, a waterfall of red numbers washed over the electronic screens. Xintai Capital's stock price plunged from a high of 88 Hong Kong dollars per share straight to $2.9. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling window of a Zurich hotel suite, Meng Xinghe sneered into the satellite phone. "Tell Chairman Zhao that the SPV equity structure chart he hid in the Cayman Islands is now a hot search on the Bloomberg terminal. All of Asia now knows he's been swimming naked." At the ancient Castle Hotel by Lake Zurich, Xintai Capital's emergency shareholder meeting was underway. Zhao Qingye's pupils constricted the moment he saw Lu Ming walk into the conference room. What shattered him even more was the sovereign wealth fund representatives and the legal team led by Meng Xinghe following right behind Lu Ming. According to Article 693 of the Swiss Company Act, we have gathered sufficient votes to demand the immediate dismissal of the existing board and to file criminal charges. The giant screen lit up, showing the account flows of Xintai Capital's overseas branches highlighted in red. Huge sums of money flowing to private accounts, the recipients' names corresponding one by one with Zhang Zhongqian and Huamingda. The cigar in Zhao Qingye's hand dropped to the floor. As he lunged for the escape passage, he was seized by 2 security personnel in black tactical gear. Operators from an international security consulting firm secretly controlled by Lu Ming. Night Owl. Huamingda's mental defenses completely collapsed in the hotel restroom. He was cornered. The mirror reflected Lu Ming's expressionless face. The system architecture, those core algorithms. Huamingda's teeth chattered. "You set this up a long time ago, didn't you? The real security kernel of CrossPass was never in the version you submitted." Lu Ming methodically washed his hands. "You thought what you stole was the treasure? It was just the bait I deliberately left behind." He turned around, his eyes looking at Huamingda as if he were a pile of waste paper. The true CrossPass security architecture, based on quantum encryption and a distributed risk control system, was published anonymously in the Journal of System Security last month. By the way, that server you used to plagiarize the code, all the operation logs, including the records of deleting the original files, were backed up to my cloud in real time. Blockchain timestamps. Immutable. Huamingda's legs gave way. His forehead hit the ceramic tiles with a dull thud. Su Yingxue's final struggle happened in a private booth at an upscale club. She tried to use that past relationship as a bargaining chip, reaching out to tug on Lu Ming's sleeve. Lu Ming took half a step back and played a recording on his phone, suing Xue at Zhao Qingye's villa, detailing how she had framed him, her tone full of smugness. She collapsed to the floor. Huamingda has already confessed. You were the one who came up with the idea to swap the security audit report, Lu Ming said, looking down at her. Financial fraud plus perjury. Enough to put you away for a very long time. The booth door was pushed open. Suing Xue screamed shrilly as she was dragged away, but Lu Ming did not pause for even a moment. Zhang Zhongqian's downfall was even more dramatic. The academic titan was at a national academic ethics lecture hall, vehemently denouncing data fraud. When the giant screen behind him quietly switched to display scans of signed orders he had written to destroy evidence, along with financial records of his dealings with multiple institutions. Even more fatal was Lu Ming's remote connection, displaying photos of gold bars and luxury watches seized from his personal safe. The lecture hall descended into chaos. Zhang Zhongqian, his face ashen, was taken away in full view of the public, his leather shoes leaving messy scuff marks on the polished floor. Gu Yan stood beside Lu Ming, watching Zhang Zhongqian's disgraced figure on the live news broadcast. She suddenly chuckled softly. You even calculated the exact angle of his humiliation? Lu Ming didn't answer. He simply handed her a document, the complete system architecture diagram of CrossPass. On the signature line, 2 names were printed side by side. Lu Ming, Gu Yan. Revenge is just the beginning. Next is rebuilding the industry's security standards. I need a co-chief risk officer who can hold down the fort. Gu Yan took the document. Her fingertips brushed lightly against his, but a wildfire of ambition sparked in her eyes. Deal. A month later, Geneva. Lu Ming, as the founder of Blackstone Capital, delivered a keynote speech titled Financial System Security and Data Ethics. In the audience sat central bank governors and industry giants from around the world. When he demonstrated an intelligent risk control system that could dramatically improve the security of cross-border payments, the entire hall stood in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After the speech, the same summit chairman who had once been so flustered was now respectfully holding the door to the lounge open for him. Zhang Zhongqian went insane in prison, repeatedly muttering, "The accounts are empty." Zhao Qingye faced multiple criminal charges. Huamingda attempted suicide in the detention center, failed, and was left with permanent disability. Suing Xue spent her days in the women's prison laundry, scrubbing prison uniforms day after day. Lu Ming only agreed to an in-depth conversation with Gu Yan, in her capacity as an international financial observer. At the end of the interview, Gu Yan asked, from a delivery man despised by the entire internet to someone who reshaped industry standards, what do you most want to say to the Lu Ming of 3 years ago? Lu Ming's gaze passed through the camera lens. His voice was calm. Don't speak. Just survive and then let those who deserve to see the light see the light. On the 7th day after Xintai Capital's stock price crash, the long-short battle in the capital markets entered a white-hot phase. Zhao Qingye's loyalists tried to create a short squeeze through dark pool buybacks. Sitting in his suite by Lake Geneva, Lu Ming gave orders through the encrypted phone. Tell Blackstone to release the 3rd tranche of shorting chips. And release the VE structure charts, hidden in the British Virgin Islands at the same time. Gu Yan's excited voice came back, accompanied by the background sound of keyboard clicking. 25 layers of offshore company nesting. Now traders all over Asia are helping him tear down the walls. 10 minutes later, Xintai Capital's stock price plunged straight down again. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange initiated a temporary trading halt. By the close, the market value had evaporated over 95%. And the accounts that ultimately caught the falling shares at the bottom were precisely the multiple shell accounts controlled by Lu Ming through Blackstone Capital. He had completed a de facto acquisition of the financial group at rock-bottom prices. The legal strangulation was carried out simultaneously. Meng Xinghe led the legal team in filing lawsuits in Switzerland, Hong Kong, and mainland China at the same time. The most critical strike was the class action lawsuit against Xintai Capital. They found Old Pan, the former compliance director who had been pushed out years ago. In court, Old Pan, trembling, brought out the original audit working papers he had preserved for years. The data tampering rate for a certain batch of transactions reached 85%, and it had been personally approved by Zhang Zhongqian with the notation compliance approved. This evidence, combined with the electronic data logs restored by Gu Yan, formed an irrefutable chain of evidence. The opposing legal team, a firm of high-powered lawyers, started off aggressively, but when Meng Xinghe played the HD video of the audit papers being swapped in the trading room and presented the National Time Service Center certified timestamps, the opposing attorney's Mont-Blanc pen suddenly punctured the case file materials. The judge ruled on the spot that all evidence was legal and valid. As the trial entered the cross-examination phase, the trading room compliance officer from that year, who had been hiding for 3 years, finally came forward to testify, describing in detail the entire process of suing Xue's swap. The courtroom was in an uproar. The technical dominance was on full display at the global launch event for CrossPass. Lu Ming rented international communication satellite bandwidth for a global HD live broadcast. What he demonstrated was not the rudimentary payment model plagiarized by Huamingda, but the complete intelligent risk control cross-border settlement, global asset management ecosystem. When the giant screen displayed a simulation using quantum computing to model hundreds of millions of market fluctuation paths and generate personalized risk control solutions in real time, even the industry titans in the audience, who had seen all manner of advanced technology, gasped. A finance professor from MIT excitedly interrupted the Q&A session. Mr. Liu, the algorithmic complexity of this system far exceeds current standards. How did you solve the contradiction between computational power bottlenecks and data privacy? Lu Ming pulled up the code. A distributed computing framework based on fully homomorphic encryption. All transaction data participates in the computation while remaining encrypted. We call it the Nuwa engine. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Huamingda, whose face was deathly pale in front of the cameras. Incidentally, regarding the so-called breakthrough published by certain individuals in a certain journal last year, its core formula derivation contains 8 fundamental errors, and the dataset in Appendix 7 was even generated using a random walk. Interested peers are welcome to verify this themselves. Half an hour later, the official account of that journal issued a statement, initiating an emergency review process and retracting the issue's cover feature. The exclusive interview Gu Yan arranged took place on a yacht on Lake Geneva. When asked why he chose such a low-key method of returning, Lu Ming looked at the shimmering light on the lake. Sometimes, only when you're at the very bottom can you clearly see who's swimming naked and who's hedging. He turned his head to look at Gu Yan, a rare hint of softness flashing in his eyes. And only then can you tell who's smashing the market and who's supporting it. Gu Yan met his gaze, a faint smile playing on her lips. At that moment, the wind on the lake seemed to stand still. When Suing Xue saw Lu Ming in the prison visiting room, she had long lost her former arrogance. She clutched the glass partition, crying and begging, her nails scraping against the plastic with a piercing sound. Lu Ming just watched her quietly until she was exhausted from crying, then slowly spoke. When you swapped the security assessment papers in the trading room that year, did you ever think about the hard-earned money of investors? When you slandered me for data fraud to cling to Zhao Qingye, did you ever think about your professional bottom line? Her face grew paler with every question. Finally, Lu Ming placed a photo against the glass. A photo of Suing Xue and Zhao Qingye on a private yacht. In the background, a blurry female figure, after HD restoration by Gu Yan, was clearly identifiable as Zhang Zhongqian's daughter-in-law. Zhao Qingye sold you out to save his own skin. I'm sure the Zhang family will be very interested in this gift. Suing Xue stared fixedly at the photo, then suddenly burst into a shrill maniacal laugh, full of despair. The psychiatric evaluation report stated severe depression with hallucinations. She would spend the rest of her life in an isolation ward of a mental hospital. The contest of international forces unfolded fiercely behind the scenes. Just as Lu Ming was preparing to submit evidence of Xintai Capital's illegal money laundering to the International Finance Association, he faced a private meeting with a representative from a certain country stationed in Geneva, who tactfully indicated that certain sensitive information might affect bilateral financial cooperation. Gu Yan accompanied him. She elegantly set down her coffee cup and in fluent English said, Mr. Ambassador, my father mentioned at dinner with your Minister of Finance last week that your country's sovereign wealth fund holds a large amount of Shintai capital bonds. If a money laundering scandal triggers a market panic sell-off, your fund's losses could be far more than several $billion. She smiled and added, "Of course, we would prefer to see your country stand with the financial security community and support a truth investigation. After all, my father's investment group is currently looking to participate in your nation's digital currency project." The ambassador's expression changed several times. Ultimately, the International Finance Association's investigation report was released as scheduled, with harsh wording, triggering a global reflection and overhaul of financial regulatory systems. Back home, a rectification storm swept through the entire financial system. Lu Ming's sanctions from those years were formally revoked, and the institution hired him as its chief security advisor. Old Pan, arranged by Lu Ming, joined the newly established Cross-Pass Ethics Committee, responsible for overseeing the authenticity of transaction data. Gu Yan's company received a massive investment from Blackstone Capital, and the blockchain evidence preservation system it developed became the industry standard. In the most prominent position in Meng Xinghe's office hung not his law firm's sign, but a calligraphy scroll, "Reverence for Data." Lu Ming initiated the establishment of the Financial Ethics and Data Security Alliance, attracting top global financial institutions and tech companies. At an alliance summit, he demonstrated on the spot how to use blockchain technology to track the entire flow of funds from source to investment, eliminating any space for money laundering. Several central bank governors from developing countries were extremely excited. Lu Ming calmly announced, "The standard is open source. Anyone can use and improve it for free. The condition is a commitment to data transparency and accepting the alliance's supervision." This move won widespread acclaim, and also left those vested interests trying to continue profiting in gray areas grinding their teeth but powerless. Gu Yan gradually moved from behind the scenes to center stage. She designed an innovative financing model for the global promotion of cross-pass, compliance benefit bonds. Investors would receive returns based on the actual compliance benefits generated by the project. At an international finance forum, she elaborated on the feasibility and potential impact of this model as a keynote speaker. After her speech, a white-haired Nobel laureate in economics stood up on his own initiative, tapped the floor lightly with his cane, and took the lead in applauding. At that moment, Gu Yan was no longer the investigative journalist hiding behind Lu Ming, but an industry changer standing shoulder to shoulder with him. At the end of the story, Lu Ming and Gu Yan stood on the top floor of the newly built Cross-Pass Global Data Center. Below them was a bustling risk control center and data processing clusters. In the distance was the deep blue sea. Gu Yan turned her head to look at him. "No one dares to call you a delivery man now." Lu Ming shook his head. He took out a slightly worn mover's badge from his pocket. The photo on it was a bit blurry, but the eyes were bright. "I don't plan on losing this name." He placed the badge on the control console, right under the proposal for the Rural Area Financial Services Plan. "It reminds me, no matter how high I stand, to never forget who I'm building this for." He turned and met Gu Yan's smiling eyes. "The next goal is to deliver secure financial services to every person who, like me back then, needed a connection but couldn't afford one. That's more interesting than just revenge, isn't it?" The sea breeze outside the window ruffled their clothes. The old grudges had long since scattered in the wind. 3 months later, a global symposium on the financial patent system was held in London. Lu Ming attended as a specially invited expert and proposed a tiered patent licensing model, allowing developing countries to use critical risk control technology on the condition of paying reasonable fees. This proposal directly challenged the core interests of large financial institutions and met with fierce opposition. But Lu Ming used detailed data and models to prove that this model would not only expand the accessibility of security technology, but also, by enlarging the market, ultimately increase the long-term revenue of innovative enterprises. The debate lasted late into the night. Finally, with the support of multiple representatives from developing countries, the proposal was approved in principle. After the meeting, a central bank official from Africa tightly grasped Lu Ming's hand, his eyes moist. "Mr. Lu, you have given us hope for financial security." Another 6 months passed. Mingde received the court's first instance verdict in the detention center. In addition to the criminal charges, he was sentenced to pay Lu Ming a total of 220 million renminbi in economic losses and intellectual property infringement damages. Suing Xue's behavior in prison was extremely poor. It was said that one day during yard time, she saw Lu Ming's news on television and suddenly rushed at the screen like a madwoman. Zhao Qingye's trial was longer and more complex, involving cross-border financial crimes and endangering financial security, among other serious felonies. His expected sentence was over 45 years. Zhang Zhongqian was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in prison. Every time he saw someone in a suit, he would shrink into a corner in terror, muttering, "Don't take the working papers." Lu Ming's life gradually returned to calm, but beneath the surface lay even deeper machinations. He began to turn his attention to the intersection of quantitative finance and artificial intelligence, trying to solve the puzzle of systemic risk early warning. Gu Yan was busy globally promoting the concept of financial data sovereignty, advocating for individuals' ownership and control over their transaction data. Although both were busy, they made time every night for a video call. Sometimes they would revisit that darkest of periods together, not to wallow in the past, but to walk more firmly into the future. On a tranquil night, Lu Ming stood alone before the observation window of a laboratory, watching the global market simulator running inside. Countless points of light flickered and dimmed on the screen. Gu Yan's video call request buzzed right on time. "Still working? Do you want to listen to the sound of the wind on Lake Geneva tonight?" Lu Ming smiled faintly and aimed his phone out the window at the night sky. "The stars here are very bright too." In silence, they listened to the sound of each other's breathing, separated by 1,000 mountains and rivers, yet their hearts closer than ever. 2 years later, Lu Ming anonymously donated $30 billion to establish the Cornerstone Foundation, specifically funding financial practitioners who had been framed. Among the first batch of recipients, an old analyst tremblingly grasped his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Lu." Lu Ming shook his head. "Just call me Lu Ming." As he turned, he heard the old man say to his assistant, "Those eyes, they are exactly like Lu Ming's back in the day." He didn't stop walking, heading for an ordinary sedan parked on the roadside. The window rolled down. Gu Yan handed out a hot coffee. "Next target, the monopoly on financial algorithm patents?" Lu Ming took a sip of coffee. "Yeah, starting with the new case Meng Xinghe just took." Amidst the traffic, that nondescript car merged into the urban torrent, disappearing into the depths of the neon lights. 5 years later, Lu Ming stood on the awards podium at the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit, his expression indifferent under the spotlight. In the front row of the audience, Gu Yan applauded as the chairwoman of Guesher International. Reporters pressed him for the secret to success. Lu Ming only answered, "Respect the data, revere the market." After the summit, a young journalist stopped him. "How do you view the controversy of the Xintai case back then?" Lu Ming paused, his gaze sweeping over the journalist's shoulder as if piercing through time to glimpse that crash. "History does not repeat itself," his voice was calm, "but it often rhymes." 10 years later, Lu Ming and Gu Yan stepped back from the front lines, pouring their billion-dollar fortune into the Cornerstone Charitable Fund. One day, Lu Ming found the wreckage of that modified old truck in an old warehouse. The rusted brake fluid line was still there. He used a cotton swab to take a sample of the residue inside for testing. On the day the report came back, he drove alone to a cliff by the sea and threw the report along with old photos into a fire basin. As the flames leaped up, Gu Yan silently appeared and draped a coat over his shoulders. "Was the data accurate?" she asked. Lu Ming watched the ashes scatter. "Not important anymore. What's important is that no one can hurt people with the same methods again." The two stood side by side until the stars filled the sky. 20 years later, Lu Ming's memoir, The Unbreakable Model, was published. The book did not sensationalize revenge, only detailing technical principles and institutional reflections. The inscription on the title page read, "Dedicated to all who guard the truth amidst a crash." At the book launch, a reader asked, "What do you consider your greatest achievement?" Lu Ming looked at Gu Yan, her hair now fully silver, in the audience. "Marrying a good wife, and paving a road to fairness." Amidst thunderous applause, Guyen held up a magnifying glass to read the tiny print acknowledgments. Thanks to my model for never crashing. 30 years later, Lu Ming and Guyen were enjoying their later years at the foot of the Alps. One day, after a fresh snowfall had cleared, they strolled to a viewing platform they had frequented in their youth. In the distant valley, a fleet of new energy vehicles was conducting a winter rally. Lu Ming pointed at the lead car. That chassis design is an improvement on my original model. Guyen breathed out a white puff of air. Just like our children. Lu Ming held her hand, now covered in age spots, the warmth in his palm just the same. In the snow, 2 lines of footprints meandered forward, eventually merging into the pure white where sky and earth became one. Zhao Qingye spent his final days in a solitary cell in a supermax prison in Colorado. His only daily activity was staring at a printed reproduction of the Starry Night on the wall. The guards found that he often woke up screaming at 3 in the morning. The stock price is dropping, close the position. One day during yard time he found half a newspaper. The headline was about Lu Ming winning a UN Financial Innovation Award. He stared at the photo of Lu Ming's serene face and suddenly burst into a nightmarish cackle, frantically carving the letter K into the concrete floor with his fingernail until his fingertips were a bloody mess. That night, he swallowed sedatives he had been hoarding for 3 months and died by the toilet. The autopsy report found crumpled fragments of newspaper in his stomach contents, right over Lu Ming's name. Su Yingxue spent the rest of her days in the medical wing of the women's prison. Nerve damage to her face caused permanent facial paralysis. During the weekly Wednesday therapy sessions, she would suddenly stand up and bow to the empty air. "I'm sorry, Lu Ming. The model is returned to you." The guards found a ring under her pillow, ground from a toothpaste tube, with the blurred initials LM carved on the inside. In her final moments she fell into a delirium, repeatedly muttering, "The brake fluid line, I cut it." She finally stopped breathing to the flat line of the heart monitor. In the 10 years Zhang Zhongqian spent in a mental hospital, his condition flared up in a bizarre cyclical pattern. On the 15th of every lunar month, he would use his own feces to scribble complex mathematical formulas on the walls. Mathematicians identified them as unpublished conjectures on quantitative trading. The orderlies found over 3,000 paper airplanes hidden in the false bottom of his bed frame, each marked with a date and number. The date on the oldest one was exactly the day of Lu Ming's car accident. Lu Ming once anonymously sent him a hardcover edition of Probability Theory. The margins of the book were filled with Zhang Zhongqian's annotations, the handwriting gradually changing from manic to neat. The last time the orderly saw him lucid was the night before he died. He suddenly grabbed the young doctor's wrist. "Tell Lu Ming Nash was right. Game equilibrium." The next morning, they found his rigid body facing east in the early morning light, finger pointing as if in mid-lecture. Meng Xinghe's legal career peaked after the Zhao Qingye case. The cross-border financial compliance practice he founded became the gold standard for global law firms. Yet his office always held that calligraphy scroll reading reverence for data. Every year on Lu Ming's birthday, he would send a bottle of 1945 Romanée-Conti, with a note that always read, "To the truth." At his retirement ceremony, he disclosed for the first time that he had received death threats from Zhao Qingye, but had stored the originals in a Swiss bank vault. "The law is not a tool for revenge," he told his assembled disciples. "It is a circuit breaker for civilization." In his later years at his Lake Zurich villa, he would often sit alone in front of a chessboard, the pieces arranged in positions that exactly matched the seating chart of that courtroom trial from years ago. During her tenure at the helm of Guesher International, Guyen transformed the enterprise into the world's largest provider of digital financial infrastructure. In her office safe was locked the first microchip Lu Ming had ever given her, along with the complete files of the Zhao Qingye case. At every earnings report press conference, she would always leave 10 minutes to answer questions about corporate ethics. After stepping down as CEO, she founded a women's leadership forum but refused all media interviews. Her last public appearance was at a lecture at Lu Ming's alma mater, where she demonstrated how to use financial derivatives to hedge systemic risk. In the corner of the blackboard where she had signed her name, she had drawn a tiny abacus symbol. The undercurrents of international capital still swirled. A certain Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund tried to bottom-fish the remaining value of Xintai capital. They were precisely sniped by Lu Ming through Blackstone Capital, forced to take over junk bonds at a high position after being hedged with commodity futures. An unusual fluctuation appeared in nickel futures on the London Metal Exchange. An investigation revealed it was the remnants of Zhao Qingye's faction trying to manipulate financial derivative prices. Lu Ming had preemptively positioned nickel option contracts, making a profit of $4.8 billion, all of which was injected into the Cornerstone Foundation. The details of these cross-border battles were later compiled by Meng Xinghe into counter-strategies in the Global Capital Encirclement, becoming a mandatory textbook for anti-money laundering training at central banks worldwide. The technical dominance extended into space. After the quantum communication satellite secretly funded by Lu Ming was launched, it completely resolved the security risks of financial data transmission. In a lecture at ETH Zurich, he demonstrated a financial authentication system based on quantum entanglement. Any tampering would be instantly detected. The International Monetary Fund once tried to invite him to participate in the Global Digital Currency Project. He only sent Gu Yan as his representative. In Washington at the IMF headquarters before hundreds of economists, Gu Yan used her phone to remotely modify the cross-border settlement algorithm for digital currency, improving efficiency by 21%. The feat shook the financial world, but Lu Ming wrote in an internal memo, "Space finance should not become a new hegemony. Open source and sharing is the true path." The legal battle extended into the Antarctic Treaty System. When a certain country tried to establish an illicit offshore financial center in Antarctica, Lu Ming, through the influence of Gu Yan's family, pushed the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting to pass an amendment restricting polar financial activities. At the Financial Action Task Force plenary in Paris, a blockchain-based anti-money laundering traceability solution he submitted anonymously was incorporated into the implementation details of international standards. Meng Xinghe fought a 6-year legal battle for this at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, finally establishing the legal status of financial data sovereignty. The penetration into the humanities was more covert. An archaeological team funded by Lu Ming discovered a remnant scroll of the Tang Dynasty mathematical classic in the Dunhuang Library cave. The compound interest calculation methods recorded within bore an astonishing resemblance to modern financial engineering. Gu Yan used AI restoration technology to recover the lost flying money remittance system, a technique later applied to the core architecture of the next-generation cross-border payment system. At an exhibition of Renaissance manuscripts in Florence, a Da Vinci notebook anonymously donated by Gu Yan was carbon-14 dated, revealing it to be a forgery made by Lu Ming with nanomaterials. But financial historians were more interested in the mathematical structure, hidden beneath the manuscript's surface, which was the asset pricing model of CrossPass. These cross-disciplinary actions gradually wove into an invisible net. The innovation in the education system was Lu Ming's final layout. The Cornerstone Business School, he endowed, had no president and practiced decentralized management. The first lesson for students entering the school was learning how to verify the authenticity of data. Their graduation project had to identify a flaw in a classic pricing model. The curriculum included a specialized module on failure studies, analyzing in detail cases like the Zhao Qingye affair and the Suing Xue incident. The library search system, designed by Gu Yan, would automatically redirect a search for success to the entry for survivorship bias. A student from the first graduating class spent 3 years reproducing Lu Ming's early trading model data and published a paper in the Journal of Finance correcting a conclusion that the academic world had followed erroneously for a decade. Upon learning of this, Lu Ming only sent a postcard. It read, "Questioning is the only hedge." The breakthroughs in mathematics were little known. An oceanographic institute funded by Lu Ming in his later years discovered a new type of pressure-resistant microbe in the Mariana Trench. Its population growth curve inspired the development of a new generation of option pricing models. The research team's paper in Nature specifically thanked the anonymous donor for providing deep-sea sampling data. That data was actually collected by Lu Ming, using a system modified from a truck's turbocharger, capable of withstanding 1,500 atmospheres of pressure. The Latin species name of the microbe was Quantibacter lumini, the specific epithet being a homophone for Lu Ming's surname. This was perhaps the last gentle imprint he left on the earth. Philosophical contemplation ran throughout. Lu Ming wrote in his private notes, "Revenge is arbitrage. Rebuilding is value investing." In his later years he often discussed Karl Popper's falsificationism with Gu Yan, believing that a model should not obscure the truth but allow it to reveal itself. In a letter to Meng Xinghe, he quoted Adam Smith's Invisible Hand, emphasizing the necessity of institutional construction. Gu Yan was immersed in using code to interpret Gödel's incompleteness theorems, trying to prove that any financial system has risks that cannot be hedged. These metaphysical explorations ultimately crystallized into the preamble of the CrossPass open source agreement. We acknowledge our limitations, therefore we pursue openness. We revere the unknown, therefore we insist on verification. After Lu Ming's passing, Gu Yan published his unissued Declaration of Financial Ethics, which argued that robo-advisors must retain a right of refusal. The declaration sparked a huge discussion in global financial ethics circles, ultimately leading to the drafting of the Digital Financial Rights Act. At a memorial lecture at Stanford University, Gu Yan demonstrated a prototype system designed by Lu Ming in his later years called risk memory, which could selectively inhibit the spread of market panic memories, but the core algorithm had an ethical verification module that could not be bypassed. A young researcher on site asked, "What if panic is also part of the market?" Gu Yan was silent for a moment, then pulled up the last video segment of Lu Ming's life. In the footage he was looking at the lab's trading terminal and saying softly, "We can halt trading but we cannot erase volatility. For it is precisely volatility that teaches the market how to price." 100 years later, humanity's first interstellar starship, the cornerstone of light, embarked on its voyage in the 22nd century. The shipboard AI's core database stored the complete works of Lu Ming. Log entry 0 read, "What we carry is not just technology, but also an obsession with fairness." This originates from an Earthling named Lu Ming, who used models to mend the rifts of civilization. As the ship passed Proxima Centauri, data transmitted back by the probes unexpectedly activated a dormant program. The AI automatically played footage of Lu Ming and Gu Yan walking in the Alps. The Interstellar Navigation Committee's report titled this footage "The Cornerstone of Civilization," with the note, "They proved that even in the deepest darkness, an individual can hold up the stars." At that moment back on Earth in Lu Ming's Memorial Hall, the restored truck still gleamed. The rust on the brake fluid line refracted a rainbow-like spectrum under the laser light. The day Lu Ming was released from prison, there was no sun. A gray, overcast sky pressed down with leaden clouds. The iron gate of the prison grated open with a rusty screech. He stood at the entrance holding a plastic bag containing a washed-out suit and a financial engineering handbook with its cover torn off. No one was there to pick him up. On a distant bus stop shelter hung an old poster of his face, with the words "Lead Perpetrator of Financial Fraud" printed underneath. The rain had rotted half the poster away, perfectly obscuring his eyes. His phone service had been cut off for 5 months. He had only 63 yuan left in his pocket. He stood for a long time in front of an ATM. The balance displayed was 0. 3 years ago, when his accounts were frozen, there had been 8 figures. Now, even the interest had been completely confiscated. The bank teller recognized him, her eyes looking at him like he was some kind of junk bond, silently pushing the bulletproof glass partition half an inch higher. The monthly rent for a room in the urban village was 380 yuan. He couldn't afford 1 month's rent plus a deposit. His landlord, old Zhao, squatted at the entrance of the building smoking. He waved his hand as soon as he saw Lu Ming. "Xiao Lu, it's not that I won't help you. Your business has blown up too big. The financial office keeps coming to investigate. I can't handle the pressure." Lu Ming nodded and shoved the only valuable thing in his duffel bag, an old laptop, toward old Zhao. "For the rent." Old Zhao didn't take it. He fished 300 yuan out of his pocket and slapped it on the steps. "Go somewhere else." He eventually found a tin-roofed shack illegally built on a rooftop in the deepest part of the urban village. An oven in summer, a freezer in winter. Monthly rent 260 yuan. On his first day the roof leaked. He recalled the basic physics he had learned years ago. Angles, slopes, flow velocity, and used plastic sheeting to fashion a drainage channel. The rainwater obediently flowed along the wall corner and into a plastic bucket. After doing all this, he sat on the hard slab bed and suddenly laughed. He hadn't lost those stress analysis diagrams he'd drawn years ago. He could still calculate the inclination angle. The next day, he started working as a mover. The tricycle was borrowed from the next-door tenant, 10 yuan a day. He fell 5 times in his first month hauling goods. The scabs on his knees hadn't healed before new wounds appeared. Once, on a delivery to a high-end office building, the receptionist glanced at him a couple of times while taking the delivery slip, then suddenly covered her mouth and gasped. "Aren't you that guy who did the rat trading?" The entire lobby went silent. Every gaze pressed down on his back like a short sell order. Lu Ming turned and left, hearing the whisper spreading behind him like a panic sell-off. After that, he only took jobs in the urban village and the used goods market. The roads were bad, buildings dense, no elevators, but at least no one recognized him. Occasionally, he would reflexively lower his head when he saw a figure in a suit, but later realized it was completely unnecessary. Who would ever notice a delivery man covered in sweat? Late at night, after work, he would crouch in his tin shack and read research reports. Since he had sold the old laptop, he used his phone. The phone was a 200 yuan fine from a second-hand market. The battery was bulging, forcing the back cover open a crack. He had to wrap a rubber band around it when charging. Once, when he got to a passage about a crucial arbitrage model, the screen suddenly went black. He borrowed an outlet from a convenience store downstairs to recharge. When it turned back on, he realized that page was from a paid data terminal, now inaccessible. 3 days later, he showed up at an internet cafe near the university. The clerk, a young guy with dyed blonde hair, gave him a subtle look when he saw his ID. "Bro, your name looks familiar." Lu Ming didn't respond. He paid for the cheapest all-night pass and took a machine in the farthest corner. The cafe was filled with smoke, the din of gamers shouting and cursing. He put on headphones and wrote code line by line. At 3 in the morning, someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around. The clerk was holding a cup of instant noodles. "Here on me. You haven't moved a muscle all night." Lu Ming thanked him and took it, noticing a sticker on the back of the clerk's phone case that read, "Integrity is gold." He looked away. That winter was brutally cold. The tin shack had no heating. Wrapped in all his clothes under the covers, he still shivered. On the coldest night, -16 degrees Celsius, he stared at a weather alert on his phone, and suddenly remembered the temperature in the trading room 3 years ago, a constant 22 degrees. Even in his tailored suit, his back had been covered in sweat. Memories hit him with the precision of a black swan event. The alarm screaming, the account blow up, Zhang Zhongqian's terrified eyes, Zhao Qingye's furious expression as he stormed in. He snapped his eyes open. Unknowingly, he had fallen asleep. Outside the window, the sky was already brightening. In early spring, he ran into an acquaintance on a delivery route. Su Yingxue was walking out of a luxury store, arm in arm with Zhang Zhongqian, an Hermes shopping bag dangling from her hand. She had gained some weight, the line of her jaw much rounder, but he would recognize that face even if it were burned to ash. Lu Ming pulled his helmet visor low and rode his tricycle right past them. In the rearview mirror, it looked as if Su Yingxue glanced his way, but she quickly turned her head back, laughing at something Zhang Zhongqian said. He couldn't sleep that night. Not because he ran into them, but because he noticed that when his heart raced, his right hand would involuntarily tremble. He sat up, repeatedly practicing the hand gestures for typing on a keyboard in the dark. Since he had no keyboard, he used chopsticks. No screen, so he drew candlestick charts on old newspapers. By dawn, his fingers were finally steady. He buried his face in ice-cold water and looked at his eyes in the cracked little mirror. They were bloodshot, but his pupils were not dilated. The first phone call from Guyen came in May. The number was from Switzerland. He almost hung up thinking it was a scam. "Mr. Lu Ming, my name is Guyen, a special correspondent for the International Financial Review. Regarding the paper you published 3 years ago on a cross-border capital flow risk model, I have a few questions to ask." He answered the phone while making a delivery, the roadside noisy, an armored truck rumbling past. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. "Are you able to talk now?" Lu Ming parked his tricycle under a tree's shade, wiped his sweat. "Yeah, go ahead." The call lasted 55 minutes. By the end, his phone was as hot as a server. the battery plummeting from 75% to 5%. He had to find a shared power bank to keep it alive. He realized then that the paper had long been retracted, the authorship replaced with Zhang Zhongqian's name. In June, a group of people arrived in the urban village. Black suits, black sunglasses, driving a black van. They went door to door asking if anyone had seen this person. At the alley entrance, Lu Ming saw the photo in their hands. It was his ID photo from his old analyst license. He turned and ducked into a public toilet, crouching in a stall for 40 minutes. After coming out, he took off his helmet, wore his mover's uniform inside out, and disappeared into the flow of the market crowd. That same night he moved. He dragged his duffel bag to the rooftop of another building. The tin shack was replaced by a canvas tarp. It leaked worse when it rained, but the rent was 60 yuan cheaper. The new landlord was a limping old man named Pan. He used to work in compliance at Xintai Capital. When he heard Lu Ming used to be an analyst, old Pan gave him a longer look but didn't ask anything. He just gave him an extra hot water bottle. It gets cold at night. Boil some water to soak your feet. Taking the bottle, Lu Ming noticed an old scar on old Pan's wrist, from a blunt instrument wound. Later, as they got to know each other, old Pan told him the scar was from being beaten. The day he had refused to sign off on a certain batch of transactions in a compliance report, he was fired the next day. Walking to the parking garage, he was pinned to the ground by strangers and had his wrist broken with a steel pipe. They didn't go all the way though, old Pan chuckled. My right hand can still work a calculator. Lu Ming was silent for a very long time after hearing that. In July, Lu Ming used the internet cafe computer to hack into Xintai Capital's trading data system. It wasn't a whim. He had prepared for half a year. He spent 5 months studying Xintai Capital's firewall architecture, using the money he saved from hauling to buy a second-hand laptop. Every night, he piggybacked on old Pan's Wi-Fi. Old Pan slept early, his snoring thunderous, perfectly masking the sound of keyboard typing. When the access granted prompt appeared on the screen, Lu Ming's hands did not tremble. He rapidly browsed the directory. In an encrypted partition, he found a document titled CrossPass Project Compliance Assessment. The moment he clicked it open, his pupils constricted. The transaction data tampering rate was 92%. Critical risk control nodes were completely non-functional. The last modified timestamp on the document was 3 years ago. The modifier ID was Zhao Qingye. Expressionlessly, he downloaded all the files, simultaneously making 5 cloud backups and 4 physical hard drive copies. On the Ghost Festival in mid-August, Lu Ming burned joss paper at the alley entrance. He couldn't quite say who he was burning it for. Maybe for the innocent investors who had lost everything due to false models. Maybe for the version of himself that had died 3 years ago. The firelight illuminated his face. The ash, caught by the wind, swirled into the air like shredded gray banknotes. Old Pan came over with a bottle of baijiu and sat beside him. The two of them drank by the fire until late at night. Old Pan got drunk and started rambling about the old days at Xintai Capital, who took money to push through illegal trades, who tampered with risk control data, who slipped threat letters under his door in the middle of the night. Lu Ming silently memorized every name, every date. Old Pan cried at the end, his face covered in tears and snot. I let down those investors, but I had no choice. I really had no choice. Lu Ming helped him back to his room, gave him water and hangover medicine, then returned to his tin shack and switched on his computer to collate all the information old Pan had mentioned. By daybreak, a cross-reference timeline spreadsheet was complete. 23 critical nodes, all pointing directly to Zhao Qingye's personal authorization. On the first Monday of September, the encrypted satellite phone rang at 3 in the morning. The person on the other end identified himself as a representative of Blackstone Capital. His Oxford accent was immaculate. He immediately listed all of Lu Ming's aliases and hideout addresses. Lu Ming stood on the tin rooftop, looking at the city skyline under the night sky. What do you want? The other party laughed. Mr. Lu, we want your complete trading model. The version you submitted to Xintai Capital 3 years ago was a castrated version. You've been holding on to the real CrossPass core algorithm, haven't you? Lu Ming didn't answer. The other party added, we've noticed your recent frequent visits to dark web quant trading forums. publishing 9 segments of high-frequency trading code under the alias Blackstone. The technical level is absurdly high. The forum admin suspected AI generation, but we know it's the real deal. The silence stretched for almost a minute. Lu Ming spoke. What can you offer? Funding. A legal team. Safe houses. A complete set of financial instruments for shorting Xintai Capital. And the other party paused. Ms. Guyan's private contact information. She has been searching for you for half a year. Lu Ming's grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles whitening. Conditions. No conditions. Or rather, the condition is that you be Lu Ming again. After hanging up, he stood on the roof for a long time, watching the east brighten. The city skyline emerging from the darkness like a candlestick chart breaking out of a consolidation zone. One afternoon in October, he delivered goods to a high-end private hospital. The order note said, VIP ward, leave at front desk. He put the items down and was about to leave when he heard a familiar laugh from a ward at the end of the hallway. It was Suing Xue. She was sitting by a hospital bed, peeling an apple for someone, her profile visible. Lu Ming instinctively stepped back into the shadows. At that moment, the ward door opened and Zhang Zhongqian walked out, a badge on his white coat reading Chief Economist, Xintai Capital. They were less than 3 meters apart. Zhang Zhongqian swept his gaze over him, didn't pause, and walked straight to the elevator. Lu Ming looked down at himself. Helmet, mask, mover's uniform, sneakers covered completely. He hadn't been recognized because no one could imagine that the dead Lu Ming would appear in this form, in this place. That night he sent Guyan his first email. Subject. This is Lu Ming. The body was a single line. The CrossPass original trading model data cluster has been fully migrated from the Wharton School's secure cloud. Ready to initiate the verification process at any time. The reply arrived 11 minutes later. Mr. Lu, welcome back. Attached are all of Xintai Capital's public trading data from the past 3 years, plus a summary of the internal financial flows we have obtained. Please confirm receipt. Also, Guyan. He clicked on the attachments. Over 200 pages of PDFs, densely annotated, every red flag highlighted in red. He suddenly realized that for the entire 3 years he had been living in anonymity, someone else had been doing the exact same thing. In November, Xintai Capital's stock price on the Hong Kong exchange broke through its all-time high. Financial media headlines were all, Xintai Capital leads the cross-border payment revolution. CrossPass about to receive full license approval. Zhao Qingya was beaming in exclusive interviews, calling it the greatest breakthrough in human financial history. Zhang Zhongqian, as the technical lead, made frequent appearances, expounding on the principles of the quantitative model in front of the camera. His wording was precise, logic-tight, because he was reciting a script Lu Ming had written. Suing Xue, as the project co-sponsor, appeared on the cover of a women's entrepreneur magazine. The headline read, Beauty and Brains. How she rewrote the boundaries of cross-border payments in 3 years. Lu Ming crouched in his rented room watching these news reports, his face expressionless. The world map on his wall was stuck with colored pushpins. Hong Kong, London, Tokyo, Zurich, Singapore. Every thread led to the International Finance Summit in mid-December, where Xintai Capital would officially release the CrossPass project's trading data. He dialed the satellite phone. Initiate the short-selling protocol on the day of the summit. Increase the short position to 12 times leverage. The other end was silent for a few seconds. Mr. Lu, 12 times means if the stock price moves more than 8% against you, your entire position will be forcibly liquidated. Lu Ming's voice was very soft. It won't go up. In early December, Old Pan was hospitalized. An acute attack of cholecystitis. He was writhing on the floor in pain. Lu Ming called an ambulance and got him to the hospital. The entire process of waiting in line, registering, paying, and getting examined took until after dark. Surgery was scheduled for the next morning. As Old Pan was being wheeled into the operating room, he grabbed Lu Ming's hand. Xiao Lu, if I don't make it, there's something in the iron box under my bed for you, Lu Ming said. You'll make it. Then he stood outside the operating room door and waited for 4.5 hours. The surgery went well. Coming out, Old Pan wasn't fully conscious, mumbling compliance codes incoherently. He found the iron box under Old Pan's bed, covered in rust. Inside was a thick stack of photocopied compliance records and a few old photographs. The photos were of a young old Pan and a few colleagues, standing in front of the old Shintai Capitol building. Beneath everything, folded at the bottom, was a yellowed piece of letterhead. Unfolding it, he saw a handwritten note signed by Zhao Qingya. Pan, this batch of transactions is not compliant, but the profit is huge. Let it pass. I'll take responsibility if anything happens. It was dated 15 years ago. Lu Ming carefully sealed the letter in an evidence bag. His fingers did not tremble. The day before the summit, he bought himself a new outfit. Not designer. Just the cheapest suit from a department store clearance rack, 290 yuan. Trying it on, he looked at himself in the public restroom mirror. Much thinner, cheekbones sharp, eye sockets deep, but his spine was straight. Old Pan in a wheelchair handed him a tie. The way you tie a tie is the analyst's way. Lu Ming glanced down. He had indeed tied a perfect Windsor knot. The morning of the summit was drizzling. Carrying a document bag, filled with a thick system architecture report, and wearing that crumpled suit, he walked toward the International Convention Center. The security chief's expression upon seeing the invitation was priceless. That invitation was a press pass Gu Yan had obtained through special channels. The name on it read Gu Yan. He walked through the glamorous crowd, the light from the crystal chandeliers falling on his shoulders like shards of glass. On the main podium, Zhang Zhongqian was passionately presenting the slides of a falsified trading model. Every time the PPT flipped a page, the applause from the audience grew louder. When the side door was pushed open, Zhang Zhongqian had just reached the line. This revolutionary cross-border payment system of ours will rewrite the global financial landscape. He saw Lu Ming walk in. A sneer crackled through the microphone. Looks like some people just won't die sneaking in here. Laughter rippled through the audience. Zhao Qingya frowned and waved his hand for security. The PPT on the main screen suddenly flickered, then switched to the original system architecture code. The hall fell silent, then erupted into noise like a circuit breaker tripping. Zhang Zhongqian's face went from ruddy to deathly pale in 3 seconds, faster than any cliff drop crash. Lu Ming walked to the front and picked up a backup microphone. Not hackers, he said. Evidence. The screen played HD video. The action of Su Yingxue swapping the security assessment papers in the trading room was as clear as a textbook demonstration. The timestamp watermark pulsed in the bottom right corner. Certified by the National Time Service Center. Zhao Qingya knocked over the speech notes and shouted to cut the power. The giant screen continued playing. It had an independent power supply. Zhang Zhongqian's voice echoed through the stereo system. Push all the losses onto that delivery man. I want him to rot so thoroughly in this industry. Su Yingxue slid off her chair. Her makeup streaked by tears, like a candlestick chart drenched in rain. The lie meticulously woven for 3 years shattered completely before the blockchain timestamps. Standing on the stage, watching all of this, Lu Ming remembered the trading room from 3 years ago. The data flashing abnormal readings on the terminal screens. Him desperately demanding a halt, shouting until his voice was hoarse. The keyboard had been hot 40 degrees. Standing here now, the keyboard was cold. But the heart in his chest was still beating 75 beats per minute, steady and strong. Later, Gu Yan asked him what he was thinking at the moment he pressed the remote. He said, I was thinking, if they had just verified that batch of data back then, I wouldn't have to be standing here now. She paused, then burst out laughing. Her laughter startled a flock of white doves on Lake Geneva, the beating of their wings like countless applause falling from the sky. The lake reflected the snow-capped peaks of the Alps, like a balance sheet awaiting an audit. Looking at the ripples, Lu Ming recalled something old Pan had once said. A good model isn't one that doesn't make mistakes, but one that can still be corrected after a mistake. He looked down at his hands. The scars on his knuckles were still there, from the frostbite of 3 years of hauling. But his fingers were steady as a trading algorithm that had undergone thousands of backtests. In the distance, the snow on the alpine peaks glowed a golden red in the sunset, like the flicker of a screen at the exact moment the closing bell rings. Gu Yan handed him a coffee, the warmth of the cup transferring through her glove. Next step? She asked. Lu Ming took a sip, his gaze crossing the lake toward the east, where countless markets were about to open, countless trades awaited settlement, Countless models needed verification. Countless truths waited to be priced. Go back and write models, he said. The lake wind caught the hem of his jacket, the crumpled suit gilded with gold by the setting sun. The Geneva bells tolled 6. Ripples spread in circles across the lake, like an infinitely expanding Monte Carlo simulation grid. He turned and walked toward the parking lot, his steps solid, each one like confirming a trade. In the distance, in an unremarkable sedan, Old Pan rolled down his window and waved at him. Old Pan was holding up the photocopy of that yellowed note, rustling in the wind. "What's for dinner?" Old Pan shouted. "Beef noodles," Lu Ming answered. As the car started, the lights of Old Town Geneva flickered on. A million lights lit up in sequence in the twilight. Behind each light was a trade, and every trade had once borne invisible risks. Looking at those lights, Lu Ming suddenly remembered the first night he had spent in the tin shack 3 years ago. He had been in the dark, repeatedly making the hand gestures for typing, not knowing what awaited him after dawn. Now he knew. After dawn would come the next set of back tests. The car drove across the Pont du Mont Blanc. The lake reflected the lights on both shores and the starry sky above. Gu Yen, in the passenger seat, flipped through her tablet and suddenly said, "The African Inclusive Finance Project has applied to use our risk control model. They want to use it for free." Lu Ming looked at the winding mountain road ahead, the headlights cutting through the night. "Give it to them. On the condition that they commit to data transparency." Gu Yen tapped a few lines on the tablet and looked up, her eyes sparkling. "Do you know what you're calling this?" she asked. "What?" "Open source justice." Lu Ming didn't say anything, but the corner of his mouth curved up. Outside the window, the Alps stood silent in the night, bearing eons of tectonic compression and glacial erosion. Every fissure was a testimony to risk. He thought any model has a probability of failure, but those who actually build things never give up modeling just because they fear failure. A road sign appeared ahead on the mountain road, pointing in 3 directions: Geneva, Zurich, Milan. Lu Ming slowed the car and glanced at Gu Yen. She was pointing at the sign, saying something, her smile flickering in the dim glow of the dashboard. He didn't quite catch it, but he nodded. The car turned onto the middle road. The taillights shrank into 2 red dots in the night, eventually merging into the sea of lights at the foot of the Alps. Moonlight fell on fresh snow, turning the entire mountain range into a giant blank sheet of paper, awaiting the first line of data at dawn.